When I found jewelry, I realized this is it. This is the way. I found that jewelry finally is the medium that really allows me to do what I've always wanted with this storytelling. When I fell in love and I realized this is the thing, I realized if I don't put in this 10,000 hours, if I don't get serious about this, I'm going to die before I can do it.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to For the Love of Jewelers podcast. I'm your host, Mark Nelson, and with me today is one of the most fabulous artists, poets, and jewelers, silversmiths, Teresa Kiplinger. And she creates one-of-a-kind jewelry that weaves together storytelling, symbolism, and soul. Lots of soul. That's what I saw all over the internet. Her unique designs showcase incredible attention to detail, and her videos are some of the most captivating, you'll find on social media, and I can testify to that 100%. I had to tear myself away from Instagram and Facebook watching all your videos. They are amazing. Just watching you work is really inspiring. I swear to God. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's so nice to meet you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
So we have a few things to talk about. I'd like to start off with a couple of questions that we came up with. One of them is you describe your work as haunting and expressive art jewelry that weaves poetry, illustration, and metalsmithing into a single voice. Could you share how you first discovered this interdisciplinary fusion and why it felt essential for your creative expression?
I can. Really, it's what I've always tried to do with my creative work, honestly. So regardless of the medium, I've been trying to blend imagery and three dimensions in my writing ever since design school, really, in college. And many of my graphic design projects in college, for example, book design, I turned a book design project into a three-dimensional piece that kind of did some nonlinear poetic storytelling that incorporated all kinds of various materials and text and really kind of challenging the idea of what a book could be. Some of it was translucent, some of it was metal, some of it was non-traditional materials. So, and that's not what we were supposed to be doing in the graphic design school, but that's what I did with that project.
Right.
And then I also really loved exploring nonlinear storytelling. Early in my career in the mid 90s, I did some experimental work with first interaction design that existed, combining animation and illustration in my poetry and storytelling in these little online experiences, like very early in the days of the internet.
Okay.
And so I think I'm just drawn to the idea of experiencing self-expression in a dimensional, non-linear way. And I'm really just doing the same thing now with my jewelry work. It's just really, I found that jewelry finally is the medium that really allows me to do what I've always wanted with this storytelling. The vitreous enamel gives me the images, and the chasing a repoussé, and the fabrication is a way of building dimension. And then the engraving, of course, is just this lovely, traditional, beautiful technique that allows me to incorporate whole poems into my jewelry. So I'm not just inscribing little stanzas. I'm moving into a body of work now that I'm engraving entire poems into my work and then building dimension into it. So it's just kind of what I've always been trying to do. And when I found jewelry, I realized this is it. Yeah. This is the way.
So a quick question for me is, what is nonlinear storytelling?
Oh, you remember Choose Your Own Adventure stories from when you were a kid? Mm-hmm. So we sort of moved into that in the digital age to where you had multiple, it wasn't like, hey, do you want to do this or do you want to do that? But it allowed you to experience, it's kind of like game design is now. Video game design. It was very video game-esque, but it was an experimental storytelling instead of running around shooting at things. So it just created this really moody atmosphere. I had sound effects that I created myself. I did voiceover and all kinds of stuff for it. So it was but it still was a poem. It was a kind of a poem that you could walk through. And so that's the kind of work that I was doing back then.
Okay. And jewelry is so fantastic because there are so many techniques that you can use to tell whatever kind of story that you want to tell.
Yeah.
I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah, you can build dimension in it. You can play with lightness and darkness and image and texture, and it's worn on the body. It's a whole. It's so perfect. It's just the
Lots
thing.
of stories within stories.
When I found it, I was just immediately in it. I was in love immediately.
So I saw your collection. It was a Dead Poet Society.
The most recent one, yeah.
Yeah. Were those all hand carved? Like with engraving or
yes, they were
cast?
hand carved with engraving, and they were with your rings. So they were your Rio signet rings.
Oh wow!
Side note, that was not paid for. But yeah, I took your Rio signet rings and I carved all of those with hand engraving. That's how I created all those.
That's how I started in grad school. I was the first one to pick up a graver in grad school.
Oh, cool!
And it was all by hand. And
yeah,
I just started carving ingots and carving directly into the metal.
Oh, wow.
And I was so much more at ease with that than carving wax.
Me too.
So I much prefer to carve directly into metal if I can.
Me too. There's something about
longer.
the resistance that the metal gives back to you and the feedback that you get from it that I just couldn't. I thought wax carving was going to be the way for me in the beginning. But you know, when you're starting out, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. So there are all these techniques out there, and I would see a piece of work that inspired me. I was like, I have no idea how this was created. So it took like years to figure that out, you know. So then I thought wax carving was going to be it. And I was like, oh no, I don't think this is my thing.
The fun part about that is when you try to reverse engineer something and figure out how it was made, you find your own way.
Yes, that's
of
true.
Making it.
You work your way around it, and then that becomes your thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love wax carving, but it is not my thing.
Yeah, same here. I love watching people do it. I'm just bad at it.
Have you ever watched Kate Wolf do it?
Yes, indeed.
Oh my gosh, it was crazy. Well, I got another question for you.
Yeah.
What's a good one here? Your work spans a lot of different materials: silver, glass, brass, polymer, clay, gold, even paper, and found photography. Can you walk us through how you decide which material best suits your specific poem or emotion that you're trying to explore?
Yeah. That goes a few different ways. Sometimes I select those materials based on certain design constraints that I've set out for myself for a particular collection. So, for example, I started working with polymer clay because I wanted to create so I had just done a body of work that was all chase and repoussé, gigantic pieces.
Yeah.
They were all cuff bracelets because your wrist can bear that level of weight because these things were big.
I've seen your photo on your website, man. You're sporting all of them, man. I was like,
yeah. Yes, I had to get a shot when I had them all in house. But so I wanted to start making really big pieces that could be worn on your ears and around your neck and things like that. And the weight just got to be crazy. So I came to work with polymer clay because it was a solution that I found that would allow me to build dimension in the same way I had been doing with chasing and repoussé, but it would be very lightweight. So I was able to build really big earrings and things like that using polymer clay. But I was using the same sort of techniques and the same aesthetic as I was doing with the chasing and repoussé and that.
Are you still using a polymer clay or?
I do come back to it from time to time.
Yeah.
I'll set it aside for a year and then I'll bring it back suddenly into another collection. I just get a kind of a hunger to use it again and get bored with other things. And then sometimes it just kind of depends on what I'm trying to express. Like sometimes I'm chasing a particular feeling or looking for a material or a method that will allow me to capture a mood. And then I look for materials that facilitate that. So right now I've just been on an endless search for thin, lightweight, translucent materials that aren't acrylic. And so I've been working with mica and things like that right now. So I'm having fun with that.
All right.
Yeah.
Today's episode is sponsored by Durston. For a limited time, save 20% when you add Durston rolling mill to your cart. Built to last, ready to roll, and seriously satisfying to use. Use code Durston20 at checkout now through June 30th. And let's get back to the episode. So since we're on this topic of materials, I think it also applies to tools. When you're looking on your website and all your social media, you have one heck of a studio.
I do.
I mean, some of the best tools and materials there is. You do hand engraving. What are some of your favorite tools? Do you have any favorite tools?
Oh no,
Or
I
is it
always
just the
stress
tool
out
that
when I get
is,
asked this because I love them all.
I know, right?
Well, of course. So the last 2 years of my practice, I've been very focused on engraving. Engraving was
Yeah, you have to be.
well, yes, you do have to be, and it was an end goal early on, like 10 years ago. I was looking at engraved Victorian lockets and things, and I was very heavily influenced by that era in my upbringing and the things that were around me when I was growing up, like book
Right.
engravings and things like that. And I always wanted to be able to do that. And so it took me a long time to build up to it. And when I finally started learning it, I just, all I did for a solid year was engraving, and I didn't do any
Yeah, you have to.
enameling or anything else.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you get very affectionate about your tools
Yes,
that
you
have
do.
like given you this gift of ability.
Yeah.
And so my pneumatic engraving system, I absolutely adore. And of course, I've got my engraving blocks. I've got several different kinds, and each of them has a special place in my heart for different reasons.
The
And
best
then
tool.
there's,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
it's crazy because we have all these tools, and it's like your favorite one is the one's doing the job right now. It's like this one's killing it for me right now. This is my favorite tool.
yeah, exactly. Well, and you know what's really neat? I guess you could say this about a lot of tools in metalsmithing, but there's something about the graver and how it
Yeah,
sits in your palm, and it picks up your body heat, and your whole body is engaged with engraving in so many ways. That was just so profound to me. Like I really connected with engraving in my whole body, and that tool, when I put it in my hand, knowing that I can do things with it now, because it was like 8 months of
yeah.
nothing was coming out of here that was any good. And so that was also, it kind of it's a symbolic thing that I can hold in my hand, and that represents like, yeah, I put in the time,
Yeah.
and now I can do some things.
10,000 hours. Did you get 10,000 hours in?
Well, I'll tell you, here's a little side note story. When I built my studio in earnest, this was about 12 years ago. Well, 10 years ago, I guess 2015. And I I started this endeavor then. So I started metalsmithing in my 40s. And when I fell in love and I realized this is the thing,
Yeah.
I realized if I don't put in this 10,000 hours, if I don't get serious about this, I'm going to die before I can do it, you know? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I was already behind. I wished I would have picked it up when I was 16 as an apprentice, you know?
Yeah.
So I just felt like I was behind in every way. And so I set about getting into my studio every single weekend without fail, all day, every day, even if I was in there not knowing what I was going to do, even if I was in there being anxious about, I'm going to have to solder this big thing today and I haven't got the clue how to do it and I don't want to do it. I forced myself to be in here. And
So you
that
went to the,
discipline, it was like
you went to
training
the
an
gym.
athlete, you know? I'm
You
sorry?
went to the gym.
Yes, it's exactly like going to the
Yeah.
gym.
Yeah.
It's
You
like
don't want to
training for,
go, but you got to go.
you don't want to go. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, if I go to the gym, things would be better in that way too. But I'd rather be in my studio. So that's where I
Right.
spend my time. And then I've just doubled down in the last couple of years where when I started learning engraving, I was like, well, you know, you hear people talking about it takes years and years to get good engraving. And then I thought, well, I guess I'm going to have to get up at 4 and engrave until I have to do my real job. And then I'm going to have to eat dinner. And then I'm going to have to engrave some more until I collapse and go to bed. And that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years, is putting that kind of time into the engraving. So I'm very dedicated to it. I can't even remember why I told you that story. I forgot what
I
the
love
question
it.
was.
I love it because it's really necessary. And I think I wanted to jump on a quote that you gave to us during an article that you did for us. It's talking about inspiration. You advise as guiding your own creative journey as a beginner, finding your voice is intimidating. And this sense of aimlessness can lead you to await inspiration to avoid your bench.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is like really profound. And, I've been doing this for like 30 years. I've been a metalsmith for 30 years, and I'm still a beginner in a lot of ways, and I
Yep.
find myself in those moments where I'm like aimless and not inspired, but getting to the bench and pushing a graver, hammering something, just making anything, making a tool to make another something
Mm-hmm.
is what drives inspiration. My the pieces I love the most have been uninspired and just creative, pure juice.
Yes.
Was like I had to do something and then just went for it, and that's
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorite pieces. So,
One of my favorite quotes, and I quote it all the time. I think people get sick of hearing me say it, especially younger metalsmiths who are looking for advice.
right.
It's a Picasso quote that inspiration exists, but it has to find you working.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. You can't just sit around and stare at the sky and wait for the ideas. For some reason, you have to be at your bench and you have to be using your hands and you have to be doing something.
100%. And my old professor from Texas Tech, his saying was similar, was like, luck favors the prepared. And it's
Oh,
kind
I
of,
love that.
yeah, it's kind of along the same vein.
Yeah.
Your inspiration's not going to come to you unless you're prepared for it.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I love that.
yeah, I'm still a beginner, 30 years into this whole
I
thing.
think we always will be. I think that's why we love this, though,
I
right?
know. That's why jewelry is so fantastic.
It's
I'm
endless.
still learning stuff all the time. Thinking with your pencil. Yes, that's another good one.
That was advice that I can't take credit for that one. That was in design school. I got that advice from Paul Sayer, who is a noted graphic designer. And that was advice he gave me in college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to take it home with me today.
It's a good one.
One of the things I've always struggled with as an artist, especially going through grad school and everything, is telling stories or drawing from personal experiences. I'm just not that kind of artist. I'm more intrigued with like solving a problem or doing something different. You know what I mean? My professor was always like, what story do you want to tell? And I'm like, I don't have any stories. I just want to make cool stuff. But your work is so wonderful to look at, and you're immediately drawn into the images that you do in your enameling. And then you do the script and the engraving and things like that. So what kind of experiences are driving that?
Well, my process is really it really starts with the written word. So my poetry is usually the seed of a collection.
Okay.
And what I like to do is choose a poem that's sort of speaking to me. Maybe I've written it 20 years ago. Maybe I'll write it for the point of making a new collection. And then I will use that as the inspiration. And inherently, poetry for me, some poets don't write this way, but for me, it is born out of a personal experience of some sort.
Sure.
Some poets can just write about anything and they turn it into kind of a fiction. I'm more of a confessionalist poet where 90% of what's in there is real, and then I take poetic license with the other 10%. So it's not always super personal, but they're deep topics, I guess, and
Yeah.
deep, and it's deep content to go into. But I don't know. I also love things that are just beautiful to look at. And I love modern minimal jewelry design.
Yeah.
I look at it, I study it, I admire it. I cannot do it. I cannot do it. I want to embellish and engrave and carve and enamel everything. So I just have to admire it from afar. But yeah, it is a little bit odd, I guess, to be sharing these personal ideas and perspectives and expressions with a whole bunch of strangers.
You're putting yourself out there, man.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
putting yourself out there.
But for me, that's always been sort of not super unnatural because I just sort of was born wanting to share. And I think as a poet, you want your work to be consumed and you want to know people have read it and you want to know they feel it and respond to it. That's the point. If it just stays in a drawer, that's not the point.
That's not the point.
So for me, it's been delightful to have like an Instagram presence where I can share those things and get feedback directly. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So
And I love how that, you can make something so personal to you and it's taken on by somebody else with a whole different meaning. And it's really
yeah,
personal to them,
yeah, I love that too. And it's always interesting for me to find out later. I'm lucky enough to get a lot of responses from people too after they receive a piece that they've purchased. And I'll get a letter explaining why it meant so much to them. And it's always very different than what was coming out of me when I created it. And that's amazing.
Yeah. It just grew.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And it's not mine anymore. Now it's theirs.
It's theirs.
And hopefully their children will know of it and receive it and wear it, and whatever that story is will mean something to them. And now it's folded in the person who bought it to their children, their grandchildren, and they'll think of their grandmother when they're wearing it. I love all that stuff.
And that's why we're jewelers.
Totally.
Totally. Metalsmiths.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's go back to tools a little bit. I saw that on your Instagram, you started working with the Bonny Doon press. Mm-hmm. How's that working out?
Oh, it's been so much fun. I am working on a new collection of locket forms that I'm using the Bonny Doon press to form out of flat sheets of metal that I've engraved entire poems on. So if you imagine something that is, 4 by 4 inches, it's completely covered in a poem. It runs all the way off the edges.
Yeah.
It's engraved script that is probably, 2.5 millimeters high. So it's a lot of engraving. And what's fascinating about that is typically an engraver would form something like that or purchase something preformed, and then you have to engrave over the corners and the edges and the curves, and it's a nightmare, and nobody ever wants to do it, But the Bonny Doon allows me to engrave flat, which is much easier, and then I'm able to use their locket dies to form it. It does not distort the engraving at all. It just beautifully forms it right over that die. And I'm having a lot of fun with that. There's so many other things I want to do. I want to start cutting non-conforming dies and silhouette dies, and I've got a million ideas, and I just haven't gotten into them yet. But once you start using this tool, you realize it does so much.
Yeah, it does a lot of stuff you don't even think it can do.
Yeah. I mean, I even stuck my big old 2-inch disc cutter in there, my Swanstrom disc cutter in there, and I used the Bonny Doon to punch a disc out of a really heavy piece of metal. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is like 10 gauge metal, that's crazy.
So do you know how that came about?
No, I don't. Tell me.
This is a fun story. So we'd go to JCK, Jewelers Circular Keystone show, and Phil Poirier, Bonny Doon, and then Tim Sheriff at Swanstrom would be next to each other. Mm-hmm. And whenever they got bored, they started doing weird stuff.
Oh, well, put two jewelers together, and that's what you get.
I know. So what they would do is they'd take these quarters in Tim Sheriff's disc cutter, and Phil would punch out the head, and then they would flip it around and put it back in. So they just started playing around together, and these two inventors really just started monkeying around and creating some really cool stuff.
Oh, that's so cool. I just got a bunch of new dies from Peter Gilroy at Bonny Doon Tool. There's one that's a cut corner rectangle. Yeah. And that is a theme that I use. It's a motif, I guess, that I use in a lot of my work, in rings, pendants, earrings, everything. It's definitely influenced by the Victorian era jewelry that I study and love so much. But I can't wait I haven't even had a chance to use that die yet. But it's so pretty. The die alone is so pretty. So I can't. And he also sent me, the next thing I want to do is I want to start carving hubs. Hobs.
Oh, yeah.
Hobs. I always call them hubs, but it's hobs, right?
Yeah.
I want to start carving hobs. So he sent me a whole bunch of those. And I'm really excited to try that too.
I made my own buttons doing that. That was fun.
There's not enough time.
I know.
There's not enough time.
We're just beginners, right?
Yeah.
So you're making lockets. Are you going to put anything inside them, or is that for the customer to do?
Yes. So I'm tinkering with a whole bunch of ideas. I'm thinking about putting enamels inside. So instead of where you might have a photo, I'm thinking of doing enameled scenes in there that continue to tell and depict the story of the poem that is inscribed on the outside. I'm also tinkering with putting my intaglio prints in there. So doing an engraving, and then making an intaglio print and forming it by wetting it inside to form to the curvature of the locket, literally the paper intaglio
Yeah.
prints, and then put glass domes over top of it, which I'm also working on glass slumping in my kiln, so I'm
Oh,
trying to get
jeez.
that put together. And then I am also working on Polaroid lifts, which is a technology of I'm taking my own Polaroids with a new Polaroid camera, black and white Polaroids, and I'm
Hmm.
using a technique where you cut them open and you can lift the Polaroid film emulsion off of the backing, and it becomes this gelatinous little ghostly goop floating in water, and you can lift it out of the water and fuse it onto paper or whatever you want. And I'm fusing it onto sheets of mica, which is like something I haven't seen anybody do. I'm sure someone somewhere in the world has, but
Yeah.
so I'm fusing those images onto mica, and it creates this. It gives me the ability to layer multiple photographic images that have this ghostly, distorted quality because of the way I'm producing them and transferring them. And I'm going to stack those into dimensional pieces that I'm going to form on the Bonny Doon. So I've got like 6 different bodies of work cooking right now. Not enough
Dang.
time to work on them all.
No, man. I'd love to see that. So what we're going to do is we're definitely going to post, your Facebook and your Instagram on this podcast.
Yeah.
And hopefully people will go and check out your stuff. It's amazing. You definitely have to like and follow your pages to keep up to speed. And I loved your website. Very well done. And it
Thank
reads,
you.
a lot of the pages read like poems,
Oh,
which
thank
I was
you.
like, very touching. And then I really loved the Metalsmith's FAQ page. It's
Oh,
like you're documenting how you're learning this stuff and what you're using and sharing that with other people. So I really encourage people to go out to your website. And that was like, is it silverpoet.com?
yes, silverpoet.com.
Okay. So highly encourage you to go and visit your website and hit every page and just gain all kinds of great information. So Teresa, we talked a little bit about it before, but you did a podcast, I think back in 2021 with Tanya Davidson. And I think she's has her group of people, which is the Jewelry Makers Guild.
Yes.
And that was an amazing podcast. It's like almost 2 hours long. It sounds like,
was.
and you guys went into like all kinds of topics and in depth. And I really want to encourage our watchers and listeners today to go and check that out. We're going to put a link on their web along with this announcement for them to go see that. And I think you also have been doing your own podcasts.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yes, I've started my own podcast with a childhood friend of mine, Joy, and it's called Artsy Types. And we like to get together. Well, I'll tell you what, during COVID, we started having these kind of wine-soaked conversations about arts and culture and creativity. And we just kind of continued doing that even after COVID. And they're a lot of fun. And so we thought, let's just drink a little bit too much wine and make a podcast. So that's what we do. We talk about all kinds of things like how do you get over imposter syndrome? How do you find a mentor? Even like real technical things like, what color should a shadow be on a lemon? Should it be dark yellow or should it be the complementary color of purple? So we have a lot of fun conversations around that. And then every once in a while we diverge down weird rabbit holes about things in art history and stuff like that.
That's the best. That's the best.
It's fun.
Now, is it on Spotify and Apple or? Okay.
It's on both. It's on Spotify and Apple, and we have a little Substack too where we publish some of our writing and things like that too. But yeah.
So I'm really loving this whole new, I'm seeing a whole new culture emerging with podcasts in the jewelry industry. I mean, we do our own thing here. You're doing your thing. Tanya's doing that. And there's a bunch of others who are doing podcasts and really bringing talent out and kind of creating this like online community of various platforms and things like that. And everybody's kind of getting to know each other.
Yeah.
Which is really great.
Yeah, it's interesting. As much as we, like, organizations have tried to build community for years and years and years, but here it is, this sort of organic growth within these different platforms have been the thing that have done it. Like, I know Christine Midgen with her Slow Made podcast, she has started a community too, where people can get together and share. And then this podcast that we're working on has been really fun because the Artsy Types podcast, we are not talking about just jewelry. Of course, I have my tangents where I go in there, but we're talking about creativity. And what's happening is we're hearing from glass artists and, of course, jewelers and painters and writers and photographers are all interested in this podcast. So it's, of course, I go down my little rabbit holes about jewelry,
Sure.
but we talk about every type of creativity because that's something that all artists and creatives share, is that those sort of core things like, my family does not understand why I spend all my time in my studio. And, it's kind of stuff like that we talk about. And that has been really fun for me because I'm getting direct messages from people I've not met before in tangential crafts. And so I'm making friends with all these other types of makers. It's been really fun.
We're jewelers and metalsmiths, but we are artists.
That's right.
We're
Absolutely.
all part of that artistic family.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So just telling our stories in our own little ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just going to hijack the show here for 2 seconds and thank Mark because when I was beginning jewelry making, Mark's videos and his peaceful presence helped me through being very confused about jewelry making all the couple first years I was in my studio by myself. Mark was the voice of peace and just letting the solder flow and don't sweat it. So thank you, Mark, for that. And I'm sure I'm speaking for many, many jewelers out there who learned a lot from you. So
I am really grateful that I was of some help. I mean, that's all I've ever wanted to be. So, well, thank you, Teresa, so much for joining us today. And really look forward to further conversations that we get to have and listening to the Artsy podcasts and seeing whatever you post on Instagram. Your work is just so amazing and touching, and it's moving for sure. Thank you again.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me. It's a
We'll
pleasure.
talk to you later, all right?
Yeah. Okay. Take care.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you to Teresa Kiplinger for joining the show. We appreciate you sharing your story and the heart behind your work. If you're interested in Teresa's other projects, visit silverpoet.com or find her on social media. And thank you to our sponsor, Durston. Use code Durston20 at checkout now through June 30th to save 20% when you add a Durston rolling mill to your cart. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe and reach out to us at podcast@riogrande.com with any questions you have about the shows or ideas for future podcasts. Have a great day.